Okay, so welcome to the session today. I know we had our other car session just a few days ago, but this will be a good refresher. I'm going to cover some of the tips and strategies before we go over the passage that I sent. So before I begin, does anyone have any questions? Any cars related um, things that you want to share before I start? Okay, if there's no question, I'll share some things. And just a reminder, if you have any questions, email us at mcat101questions@gmail.com. If you're not on the listserv, you can drop your email and I'll add you at the end. Okay, so are most of my car sessions the same? Yeah, so most of them I just cover some strategies before we actually dive into the passage. So they are the same in that sense. And if you ever miss anything, you can definitely watch the recording. It's going to be on our YouTube channel. So this was definitely one of the more interactive sessions where you guys can learn how to do the passage and we go through it together. So I'm just going to cover these tips before I go over how to do the other passage. Okay, so these are some of the tips that worked for me. I would just read the first few sentences of the passage and decide if this was something that I was going to do right away. You can decide this based on one trick that I like to use is if you can reword the passage so that your little sibling could understand it or something. And if you can, that's probably a passage that you want to do right away. Um, and then if I'm going to do it, I would preview the questions. I like to preview the questions just because I know where to look out in the passage a little bit more, and I'll read that paragraph a little bit more carefully. Then after we're done reading, I forgot to write this in, but like I do a one word summary. That's really helped me just break down the passage. So it's not just one big blurb, and is you can see how the passage and all the paragraphs tie in together. Then obviously you want to do the easier questions first. If something is tricky, go ahead and skip it, come back to it at the end. So you have a better understanding just by doing the easier questions. You can understand what the passage was about. And whenever you're stuck between two answer choices, you want to really consider the bottom line and avoid extreme answers. There's always going to be something in the answer choice that is wrong and why the right one is right. So once you're practicing, you really want to go through your mistakes and understand why one answer is wrong versus another one. This can really help you understand and kind of start thinking like the test maker. And that's kind of how I've done a lot of the passages where there was two answers that kind of sounded the same or they both seemed right. You just want to go through each word carefully and understand why one might be wrong. It might be out of scope or something might be too broad, too narrow. So you want to keep that in mind and keep in mind what the author's tone was for that passage. And a lot of students mentioned that they don't understand the passage sometimes, um, and they keep rereading. So the thing is, don't get bogged down by the details. There's going to be some sentences that you just don't understand, and that's going to be okay. Just write down your one word summary, and if it shows up in a question, you can go back and try to understand it a little bit more. Just try to keep an open mind and yeah, so let's practice these tips. And how did you guys find this MCAT passage? Oh, oops. Can you see my screen still? straightforward. Okay, hold up. I have to go back. What is happening? Sorry, guys. Give me a second. Okay. Okay, can you see my screen again? Yes, okay, perfect. Yeah, so this passage was straightforward. That's great. Okay, I'm going to go over and we're going to annotate some of it and go through any questions you guys might have. So, I like to read through the questions. Why does the author mention Civil Rights Act in paragraph 5? So that's something we're asked about. While finding from other research would raise questions about the conclusion reported in the passage. Advocates for a single school entrance age might conclude. Suppose the author was asked to advise a newly formed district based on the last paragraph, the author would recommend. And why is school readiness used? Great, okay, so can anyone tell me what they highlighted in the first paragraph and what summary is good for the first paragraph? So feel free to write anything in the chat or if you feel comfortable unmuting yourself. Controversy, yep. And I'll even write what has produced that controversy. So it's the two things, the age and the sex of the child. And then we're talking about cutoff dates, varying. There's no research to support those ages. There has been a trend in raising the school entrance age. And then there's support on the other end to have it for even younger kids. So how can we summarize paragraph 1? So what is like a quick summary what paragraph 1 was trying to say? Yeah, that's perfect. Controversy, and I'll even write why. So as you can see, I really shorthand, just make sure you understand the summary, no one else has to. Okay, moving on, paragraph 2, what else was important here? Yeah, so we're talking about there's different definitions. What conditions should we meet? And then they're saying younger children have academic difficulty. And this was a study between the month of birth and sex and their performance on this test. So how can we summarize paragraph 2? So please participate. This is really going to help you guys out. Yeah, perfect. So we have an example of a study that was done. Thank you. Okay, moving on, paragraph 3. So they were sensitive to the differences from different birthday groups. But then as they age, the difference disappears. So before kindergarten, it was significantly different. Different. Okay, how can we summarize paragraph 3? So we're talking about the study a little bit more, and yeah, so we're saying aging, the effect of aging on that study. So I don't know how to draw this, but let me try. Yep, on the test, I would just draw an arrow saying that aging was elaborating on that study. Okay, great. Paragraph 4. So what did you guys highlight in paragraph 4? What was, yeah, there were significant differences between only 2 combinations. And then later, there was only 1 difference. And this difference is a result of child change. Yep. The young children seem to catch up, and then it's consistent with the literature. And the age effect is relatively small and disappears as you age. So, what is a good summary for paragraph 4? Yeah, so oops, age effect disappears. So we're saying if there was an age effect, it tends to disappear within a year or two and as you age. Okay, moving on, paragraph 5. Okay, yeah, so now we're talking about gender, test performance by gender. There's not consistent results that support that young boys' immaturity and why they would get poor performance. So even though it's recommended to delay the school for young boys, it's not supported by the data, and it would violate the Civil Rights Act. Yeah, perfect. So what is a good summary for this? Yep. Okay, and I'm just going to refer back to the study. Okay, almost done, guys. Paragraph 6. So further research says that it's going to be relative. The younger children will perform lower no matter what data is used, and this pattern is persistent around countries. Yep, so youngest children have performed at lower levels no matter what date, and this pattern is persistent among countries. Yeah, that seems pretty important. Okay, great. What is a summary word? Yeah, so I would even say the young are consistent. Okay, last paragraph. So this is kind of what the author's opinion is here. So rather than spending time debating how to predict this, this time should be spent more constructively in determining how the schools can meet the needs of children with a variety of individual differences. Um, it needs to become an issue of making the school ready for the variety of children. So we kind of get an insight of what the author thinks about the situation. So This is really important here. So he's saying instead of just debating about this, we need to do something else, such as consider the individual differences that exist between children. So yeah, so what's the summary word here? Focus on diverse needs. Yep. Okay, perfect. So now we can go through the questions. Does anyone have any questions on the passage or how we did the summary? Just looking at this, we can see how the passage developed. The author introduced a controversy and why, and then he gave us a study, and he said aging affects that study. And then he said, but then as you age, it actually disappears. And then he addressed gender roles on the study, and then he said, the young actually perform consistently lower, and we need to actually focus on diverse needs. So you can kind of see the passage flow right here. Okay, moving on. The passage suggests that school readiness is primarily used to determine what? What do you guys think about this? Yeah, so most of the passage was about when we should start school, and kind of that was a controversy, right? We didn't talk about how well the school performs, how classes are organized, or even future success. So those are just eliminated. B is the best answer. Okay, number 4. So based on the author, what would he say based on the last paragraph? C, yeah, so he wouldn't say use gender because we addressed that it varies by gender. There's not that many consistent results. He wouldn't say to apply something uniformly. This is good. It goes with focusing on diverse needs, different kinds of students. So C would be the best answer. And we didn't talk about the district's population. So remember, you just really want to stick to the bottom line, and especially if they mention something like the last paragraph, you want to consider what the focus was. And this is why it's helpful to do a little summary, because sometimes we don't have time to reread the whole paragraph. We can just look at our kind of summary and understand. Okay, number 3. Yes, Ashley, you do see the passage and the questions like this. This is the exact format of the MCAT. Okay, so we want to be careful here. So on the basis of the passage, advocates for a single school entrance age. So they're saying we can have just one single entrance age. This is going against the author, what he's saying. So if someone's saying, yeah, you can have just one age fits all. So they're probably going to conclude that something along those lines would be A, because if they're saying one age can fit everyone, they're probably going to say gender doesn't really play a role either then. Does that make sense? And then B, just saying the entrance exams cannot test for this is on the extreme side. So the author was saying, he didn't say like they can't test it at all. He was saying the time used to do these studies, it might be better to do something else. We didn't talk about learning faster in school versus home or something, or doing this more often. We didn't talk about that either. How I canceled out B, yeah. So entrance exams cannot test for readiness. So just saying this is extreme if we're saying these exams cannot show us anything at all. That's what this answer choice is saying. Whereas the passage was saying there's a controversy, there's some studies that support it, some studies that don't support it. So that's why B would not help. But if they're saying advocates for a single school entrance age, they might want to say, yeah, if there's a single age that both everyone can start school, they're probably going to say boys and girls can start school because they mature at the same rate. That's something someone would say if they support one age group to just start school. Let me know if that makes sense. Yeah, Brian, could you elaborate on your question? I'm having a little bit trouble understanding it.
I I didn't think actually I didn't think the choice B is extreme because I thought the overall passage they in the second paragraph they say they did not have the agreed definition for readiness, and then later in the general idea of the passage is talking about how individual difference and individual needs should be the primary concern.
Yeah,
So I
so
didn't, and also I'm not sure how to read between the line. Actually, that's
okay,
my.
yeah, no worries. So, okay, so do you understand that the author was saying that children who do enter the school, who are younger children have difficulty catching up with academics, right? We understand that part?
Yes.
Okay, great. And then so the author was saying that this test measures the differences, and however, when they age, the difference does disappear. And sorry, I'm trying to see how to word this. So B is saying the entrance exams cannot test for readiness. So this is too extreme because it's saying we can't use these tests at all. The exams are not going to work at all. The author did not say that. He's not, he is saying that we should step away from them because we're wasting our time. We might be able to use this time to help children individually instead of trying to make a test that can determine the age.
And
He's saying,
if this choice rewarded to be the entrance exam has problem or is a flawed, then would then be the correct answer choices?
can you repeat that?
If this choice is changed to the entrance exam is flawed or is like
It's
a
flawed.
problematic, then would this be the answer choices for this question?
Well, I think this question is pertaining more to the entrance age. So
Okay.
you want to be careful what the question is asking for. So it's saying advocates for a single school entrance age. So they are saying that the age effect, they're saying younger children and older children can both start. Like there's one age that they can start, like maybe 5 years old.
Oh, I see.
Versus
Yeah.
someone can start at 4, someone can start at 7. So
Okay.
if they're saying there's a single age, 5 years old, they're all starting school.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter for boys and girls then. They're saying boys and girls are equal. They all have to start school at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, like you have to find the best answer. So B doesn't have the best answer. It also seems a little extreme for this question and what the specific question is asking for. Does that make sense?
Yes, the explanation
Okay,
is very thorough. Thank you.
okay, perfect. Okay, number 2. Did I miss any question? Am I right to assume that the advocates are basically believing the opposite? Right, so the author did say that there isn't a single age, so they are saying the opposite, yes. Okay, what finding would raise questions about the conclusion? So we want something that doesn't support the conclusion. Okay, I'm seeing some C's, some B's, and an A. Okay, yeah, so the conclusion, what were we saying? We want to focus on diverse needs, right? And that, okay, children. So let's go through these answer choices. A, single gender educational institutions outperform their mixed gender counterparts. Okay, we can keep that because it does address gender. Okay, male students are often encouraged to spend more time on schoolwork than our female students. Okay, so this is not something we can really conclude because we talked about school readiness, not homework, and the time we spend on homework. That's out of scope. We cannot say anything about that. Okay, young female students in other countries consistently outperform older male counterparts. Interesting. So we're saying young female students do better than older male students. Okay, so in this passage, we said in paragraph 5, we said, where was it? Sorry, yeah. No, paragraph 6, sorry. The youngest children have consistently performed at lower levels than the older children. So that's the conclusion of the study. So if we're saying something opposite, that young female students do better than older male students, that's going against that. And we're also saying that gender plays a role where we said it actually didn't. So C would be the best answer here, since it's going against both the gender conclusion and the younger older conclusion. That would be a better answer, but let's go through D. Adult students do worse on standardized exams than juvenile students. That is something we cannot say from this study at all. Because we were talking about mostly children, not adults, and not juvie. Does that make sense? Why C is better than A? Okay, perfect. Last question. Why does the author mention Civil Rights Act in paragraph 5? So paragraph 5, we talked about gender. Okay, yeah. So we mentioned the Civil Rights Act. We were talking about gender. So something pertaining to gender um, should be something that we're looking out for. So we said test performance by gender. There's no consistent results between young boys and poor academic performance. And even saying this would be violating the Civil Rights Act. So the author was saying gender doesn't have a role in the school readiness, so C would be the best answer here. And we can go through why, because B does look like a good answer choice here. Oh wait, sorry. No, I meant B. Yeah, B is the better answer choice because gender should not play a role. Sorry, I said C and B. Because saying gender has no effect, that is a little too extreme. Whenever you see something like no, that's not why the Civil Rights Act was used. It's not saying gender doesn't play any role. It's just saying we shouldn't think about gender in terms of this. Does that make sense? We didn't really talk about the legal power in A. We didn't talk about being an outdated concept. So D is also wrong. A is out of scope. Yeah, A is definitely out of scope. We didn't talk anything about legal power. We can cross that out. And also D. Sorry, I saw a question earlier. What did you mean by I knew this was wrong, I still put A? Did you want me to go explain it? Was that for question 1 or question 2? Let me know if you are still confused. It was for 1, you got it? Okay, perfect, yeah. Yeah, saying that is assuming that they defined the Civil Rights Act. They didn't really mention anything else, just they mentioned the word, not any explanation of what that is. Okay, does anyone have any questions before we move on and do a practice passage? If not, I'm going to give you guys this passage now. You guys are going to have around 8 or 9 minutes to do this, and let me know when you're ready so I can start the timer. Are you guys ready? Please let me know. Okay, perfect. I'm starting the timer. Okay, we're going to go over this now. So how did you guys think of this passage? It was easy? Okay, that's good. Okay, so let's start. Very confusing. Yeah, I thought the passage was a little confusing to understand actually. The questions were okay, but the passage itself was a little difficult. Yep. Okay, so just going over the questions, we're thinking about where we would want to put the passage in some essays. What is implied about logic in paragraph 2? Okay, the primary purpose. And I have no clue how to say this name, so I'm going to say W. What is W's understanding of math? And W believes that philosophical problems can be blamed on what? Okay, perfect. So I'm going to combine these kind of paragraphs, or this one's just a sentence or two. So let me know what you guys highlighted. So we're starting that his relationship to math can reveal surprising things about philosophy. So that's important. And his view on language, whereas, so kind of a contrast, his views on language seem to, I don't know that word, so I'm gonna skip it, but I think confuse his thoughts into early and late periods. If I'm wrong, please correct me, but so we have a contrast view of language. He had contradicted himself. Yep, perfect. Yeah, let me know anything you guys highlighted in the second paragraph. So we talk about Tractatus. Okay, and he says math is logic. And math is made up only of rules. So he is saying math is logic and math is rules. So the rules of syntax matter. Okay, great. Paragraph 1, what can we say here? Paragraph 1 and 2, I guess. So I would say math is logic and rules, and math is rules. Perfect. So paragraph 3. He's going to reject many of the assertions he make about language, later to reject. So we're saying there is an early version and a later version of W. So the early one, he's saying all language is going to follow the same rule, whereas the later one says there's many different language games, each with their own rule. So the early one says the interesting nonsense results from the violation of rules, and the later one says the interesting nonsense is a result of confusing the rules. So we kind of have a division of his work. So what is a good summary? Yeah, I see it, early and late W. Okay, moving on, paragraph 4. So we have a belief that all these problems arise from confusion about language. So that's consistent between those two W's. The latter one says there's more emphasis on the social aspects of rule following. And we have some law of non-contradiction, and he kind of explains that more. So what is a good summary? So we have something that's consistent here. And then he also says why the latter one has emphasis on the social aspects of rule. Yep. So I would say consistent is the confusion with the language. So that's consistent between both of them. Okay, moving on, paragraph 5. What did you guys highlight? So his attitude towards logic changed in a way similar to how he understood language. He went from one logic to thinking there's many different kinds. Yeah. And it went similar to his understanding of logic. And we have some example. Okay, so how can we summarize paragraph 5? So we kind of see his attitude shift here. So I'll just say, so one kind of math logic, I'll just say ML to many. Okay. Last paragraph, what did you guys highlight? So this paragraph said, even though they're different, there is agreement on many issues, including the philosophy of math. His rule changing changed, but he still remained committed, saying that the entire nature math comes from rules. And they both still say math is logic. And there's no surprises in logic and none in math. So it's kind of going back to the first and second paragraph where we were talking about logic and rules. So he still thinks that. So what would be a good summary? So we can say agreeing with, I'm just going to say paragraph 1 and 2. So we're going back to them and agreeing with the math logic, math is rules. Okay, moving on to the questions. Paragraph 5, or no, sorry, question 5. The philosophical problems can be blamed on anyone else? What did you guys put for this question? Okay, interesting. We have a pretty even split between A and D. Interesting. Great. So A, problems with how philosophers communicated their ideas. Yeah, okay, we can keep this. The belief that philosophy should not have set rules. No, we did not talk about not having rules for philosophy. Changes in how the terms have been used. No, we didn't discuss this either. that much because that's not where the problems come from. Okay, D, differences in how various philosophers valued logic. Okay, so where did we talk about the problems? So we talked about the problems arise from confusion about language. So that is closely with answer A because that is how they're communicating, and that's where the problems are coming from because the language. So that is the best answer, just going by this sentence here, where the confusion is coming from. So according to the passage, W believed that the problems are coming from confusion about language, and that's how the philosophers are communicating. It is not between how they value logic. Does that make sense? We really didn't talk about how different philosophers value the logic. Okay, perfect. Question number 4. So his understanding of math. What is that similar to? Yeah, so is similar to logic. So anything that would be logical, that would be like C. We can eliminate those. Those don't really make sense in how he understood math. Okay, number 3. What was the purpose of this? Why was the author mentioning all of this stuff? Okay, I'm seeing some B's. Yeah, so let's go through this. A, argue for re-evaluation. No, we did not. That was not the purpose, and we didn't talk about that. Okay, suggest that W saw math as logic. Yeah, that could be it. Explain why he believed that math could take on different forms. Yeah, that was discussed as well. Okay, D, distinguish his work from language from his work on math. No, we didn't really emphasize all of that. So he said there's similarities, but we didn't really talk about it so much that we can point out the differences. So between B and C, we talked more about B because he mentioned math as logic, and then he also went back to saying that he still agreed that math is logic. The different forms, we only talked about that in paragraph 5. So B would be the best answer. Okay, number 2, which is implied by logic. Yeah, so that is definitely here. Math is logic and math is rules. So in paragraph 2, that's what we talked about. So the best answer would be saying D. Logic is also rules. If math is logic and math is rules, we can substitute these in for each other then. Does that make sense? Okay, perfect. Number 1, where would we put this passage? Yeah, so we didn't really talk about how math changed his philosophy. B, his understanding, yes, understanding of math. The impact of his work on philosophy, no, we didn't really address that. math and its historical relationship. No. So B would be the best answer choice. Do you guys have any questions on this passage? So this was confusing, but the questions were okay. So do you guys sometimes see the balance? The passage might be really confusing, but it really helps to break it down, at least understand 1 or 2 sentences in each paragraph so you can understand the overall gist of the passage. Are there shortcuts to highlight? Yeah, so on the keyboard, well, I have a Mac, but it's Option H to highlight and Option S to strike out. And I think it's the same on the MCAT keyboards or Alt, yeah. Yeah, no worries. How should you go about guessing? You can narrow it down to 2, but you picked the wrong one. Yeah, so the best idea is to just, when you do that, make sure you understand why you picked the wrong answer. What was wrong about it? You really want to understand that. So, because next time you'll get better at picking the right ones if you can notice these small details. Oh, if you notice the small details and you know where to go back to the passage and really just stick to what is on the passage and not using any outside knowledge. So if you still have questions, feel free to email me and we can talk more and I can help you out. Do you guys have any other questions? Thank you for coming. I hope this was really helpful. And as always, if you can, please support MCAT 101. We would really appreciate it. Okay, I'll see you guys later. Bye.